Hi, I'm Dusty from Poison Spyder, and we have a new product to show you. This is our JK taillight harness, and it's used when you want to use our LED taillights, reverse lights. It makes all of that a simple, easy installation without having to do any wire cutting or splicing. So I'll show you what each of the components look like and how they work, and then we'll do an installation. So there's two main harnesses. There's the driver's side and the passenger side harness. This is the passenger side. It's a little bit more involved because it has the wiring for the license plate light. The driver's side doesn't have that. So you would use this in conjunction with our license plate light and third brake light. On the passenger side harness, it plugs directly into the stock taillight harness. Once we pull the stock taillight off and unplug it, we can just plug this harness right into it. On the other end, this is your LED taillight. It plugs right into that. Also, on this harness, we've already built in the resistor so that you get the proper flash rate. We sell these separately for people that are doing LED taillight installs. This is now built into this harness, so you don't have to do any splicing for that either. Also on the harness, we have two connectors to use for reverse lights. These are the reverse lights that we sell for use with our crusher corners and also in our bumpers. So if you've got two of them, if you have them two on each side, both up in the corner and down in the bumper, there are two connections that you can use. Okay, there's a little protective cover, so if you don't use either of them, or if you only use one, you can just leave the cover on. Okay, we have two separate jumpers that go from this harness to the reverse light. There's a 24-inch one. This one you would typically use to run from this harness down into the bumper. So if you're running a reverse light that's in your bumper, like in our rock brawler rear bumper, you would use this one. If you're using a reverse light that's mounted in the corner, just under the tail light, you would use this small 4-inch jumper. So these are sold separately, so you don't have to purchase them if you don't need them. And if you don't need them, you simply leave this little plug intact on the harness. Okay. The last part of the harness is this 6-foot lead that's used to attach the third brake light and license plate light. Typically, with one of our bumpers, you would install this on the tire carrier. You could also use it installed on the tailgate with our tramp stamp. So you would use this same harness for either of those conditions. Okay, so we're going to show you how the passenger side harness is installed. The driver's side basically uses the same procedures. It's a lot simpler though. You'll figure that out when you go to install the driver's side one. The install is fairly simple. You only need a few tools, an assortment of picks. Maybe if you have a 90-degree pick, a hook pick, and a straight pick, a Phillips screwdriver to remove the stock tail light, needle nose pliers, some electrical tape to retape a few things that we're going to untape, safety glasses of course, and this is a short length of hose. This is actually ARB hose that comes with an ARB locker. Some of you might have this laying around. If you don't, you can find something similar or use a couple of drink straws, and I'll show you what that's used for and explain more about it when we get to that. To remove the stock taillight, we simply need a Phillips screwdriver. Now as you look at the taillight, you can see that there are actually 4 screws, but we only need to remove 2 of them. They're the 2 on the inside. Now with the 2 screws removed, we can simply pop the taillight housing off, and this is where we can unplug it. There's a simple push-in tang right there. Push in on that with your thumb, simple unplug. Put this on Craigslist. All right, we start by opening the tailgate. This is where the tricky part of the installation is going to be. It's really not that tricky, but it's hard to explain without a video. So basically what we're doing is this wire, which comes in the kit with the harness, is a jumper to go from the plug-in for the stock brake light, third brake light, back into the taillight housing to plug into our taillight harness. All right, first we have to remove these two covers so we can access the inside of the tailgate. This one you just grip right there on the inside, pop it, and it comes out. This one is a similar procedure. There's tangs on the bottom, and you just grip it and it pops. And then it just comes out. Those are the nasty little buggers that were holding it on. So here's the wiring that we're trying to access. On the inside here, on this particular Jeep, it's already been removed, but this is where the third brake light plugs in, okay? This is where our jumper harness is gonna plug into it. We're not gonna do that right this second. First, we're gonna work on the other end, getting our little jumper harness through this and down into the corner of the Jeep. Okay, so we need to follow this wire through into the taillight, into the corner housing of the Jeep. This Jeep, we got lucky, it only has a carpet covering. Some Jeeps might have a speaker box here that you'll have to remove. But on this one, all we need to do is peel the carpeting back. And here's the harness coming from the tailgate. It goes up and snakes around into this area, and then that goes through the body with a rubber grommet. So basically, it's pretty easy to just pull that rubber grommet and then fish the plug through, and that's the taillight plug that we unplugged on the other side. Here we have the third brake light jumper wire, and to install it, we have to snake it through the tailgate, but the tricky part is getting it through this piece of nylon webbing. To do that, remember the piece of ARB hose we showed you at the beginning. If you don't have this, you can use a similar piece of hose you may find lying around, or a couple of straws. Basically what we're going to do is insert the pin end of the wire into the end of the hose and just kind of push it in there so it's got a good grip on it. This ARB hose works great because it's a perfect fit for it. To get access to the end of this nylon webbing, we need to undo this farthest zip tie holder, okay? With a couple of picks you can undo it. We've already done that for simplicity here. We've also already removed some of the electrical tape that's around this. When you open yours up, you'll see that you have to remove some tape. At the other end of the nylon webbing, there's also a couple of these little zip tie wire clips that you'll want to undo. Also, there may be some electrical tape that you'll have to remove. We've already done that on this one. Once both ends of the nylon sheathing have been untaped and unzip tied, you can now feed your hose through. And it comes out the other end, and it'll simply pull the wiring harness with it. And we can pull the harness out of the hose. It's important to remember which direction we're going through this grommet. Remember, we pulled the taillight plug all the way through. So this is actually the outside of the Jeep. This is the inside. So we need to go from the inside to the outside. Be careful when making that, when pushing this through. Now it's a pretty tight fit getting the wire through this grommet. We found the best way to do it is just a quick little dab of WD-40, just to lube things up a little bit, and then push the wire through, and then grab the pin, and through it comes. Pull enough of the wire through the grommet to be about the right length of the connector. It looks like I need a little bit more. And then this plug is going to plug into the back of the connector, but we'll do that on the other side. For now, we're going to take both the connector and the wire, push them back through the hole, and then push the grommet back into place. Now the other end of the wire, simply need to route along this existing wiring harness, and you can use a couple of zip ties to hold it in place. and then just fish it through this hole, and then with your hand on the other side, grab the plug and pull it through. And then, with our jumper wire plugged in, now we can clean up this area, putting the covers back on. Remember to use some zip ties to hold this in place, especially here on the end where we loosened it up to fish the wire through. Make sure it's zip tied again. We haven't done it on this one because it's a demonstration, but you'll want to use some electrical tape to hold the end of the nylon sheath. Once the wiring's in place, put the cover back on. At the other end of the sheath, you'll also want to re-wrap it with electrical tape, and then reattach it to the wiring loom holders. And these do, if you've unhooked them with a pick rather than cutting them, you can re-zip them together. Any loose wiring, just use a couple zip ties to hold it all in, and then simply put your covers, carpets, fascias, all of that back in place. Back on the outside of the Jeep, this is the piece of the harness that we fished back through from the inside. This is our jumper wire, and the pin on the end of the wire will be inserting into the OEM connector. We start that by removing the pin lock. That's that white piece of plastic you see down inside there. A 90-degree pick will do it. Looking at the back of the connector, you'll see a couple of empty spots. The corner is the hole that we're going to use. If you look down in there, you'll see that there's still a little rubber plug in there to keep the elements out. We can use a small needle nose pliers, reach in there, grab that rubber plug, and pull it out. On the pin, if you look really closely, you can see a small metal tang on one side of it. Now, as you look at the back of the plug, if you're looking at the plug in this orientation with the 6 plugs oriented sideways and the hole we're going to use on the bottom, we want that little metal tang to be pointed downward, basically like that, as we insert it into the plug. So get it in that way, and then simply push it into place. And you'll hear a little snap when it's in place. And you'll know it because you're not able to pull it back out. Once the pin is in place, we can put the pin lock back in place. So just slide it in. There's only one way it can go. You can't get this wrong. So just slide it in and then push it in place. Now it's simply a matter of plugging our harness into the Jeep's stock taillight harness. Now there's a couple more things you need to take care of. First is mounting this little heat sink for the resistor for the taillights. There's a few different ways you can do this. What we would suggest is getting a couple of self-tapping sheet metal screws and finding a place inside that you can attach this. Now if you look straight back in there, you'll see that there's a flat surface. If you have a long enough bit on your electric driver, you could attach this back in there to that flat surface. Just make sure that you don't screw through an interior wall. You don't want to have any screws protruding into the inside of the Jeep. The license plate and third brake light harness will now need to be routed to wherever you've mounted or you're going to mount the license plate light. From inside the corner housing of the Jeep, if you reach down inside there, you can feel there's a thick piece of foam. If you lift that, it reveals a hole in the bottom of the sheet metal that you can use to route this wire out, down through the bumper, and to wherever it needs to go. Now if you're running our LED reverse lights, they come like this with a rubber grommet. Typically they'll either be mounted in our crusher corner directly below where the taillight will be, or down in the bumper. Now we have a couple of different jumpers to use. This is a 4-inch jumper that you would use if you're mounting it close to the taillight, or a 24-inch jumper if you're going to be mounting it down in the bumper. If that's the case, you'd route it the same way down through the hole that we described in the bottom of the taillight inner housing. Now these jumper harnesses easily plug right into our taillight harness. You'll see there's a little protective plug. Simply remove that. Take the new harness, plug it in to the back of the LED. So if you're running 2 reverse lights per side, one in the corner and one down in the bumper, you'll of course use both of these leads, the short one and the long one. If you're running neither, simply leave the plug in place and stuff these back inside with the rest of the harness when you're done. Lastly, there's a plug that connects directly to our 4-inch round LED taillight. Now in this demonstration, we're obviously not doing a complete installation. This Jeep doesn't even have a set of our corners, and it's not equipped to take the round LED taillights. However, in a typical installation, once we have all that in place, we would place all of this harness back inside, use zip ties, wire loom, whatever you need to keep it in place, and then simply button it up. On the driver's side, it's exactly the same procedures, with the exception of running that brake light jumper wire, which, as you'll recall, was the majority of the work over there. So that makes the driver's side extremely easy. Now, for your setup, if you're not running a third brake light, an LED third brake light, you can simply run a driver's side harness on the passenger side. It makes that installation a lot easier. If you have any more questions about the Poison Spyder JK LED taillight harness, please check out our website at www.poisonspyder.com or give our sales department a call at 951-849-5911 or call any of our Poison Spyder dealers.